GamingBolt presents 15 times video games forced you to replay levels. Video games provide varying degrees of replayability. Some titles like Uncharted and The Last of Us are a one-and-done experience, while others like Assassin's Creed and Divinity Original Sin 2 encourage you to explore the open world or experience the game with a different character, respectively. However, there are plenty of games which force you to replay or revisit levels, whether it's part of the main campaign, the end game, or a side activity. Let's take a look at 15 examples of this. Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Though the gameplay for Middle-earth: Shadow of War can get somewhat repetitive in its own rights, it's the Shadow Wars that really highlight replaying the same levels continuously. As Sauron attacks the keeps that Talion has captured, you'll need to defend them again and again as the difficulty rises. If that weren't enough, you'll find yourself striking out into the same regions time and time again to grind for new followers. Destiny 2. To Bungie's credit, Destiny 2 does have a ton of open-world content that you won't come across in the story, but reusing the same areas still comes into play. Upon finishing the campaign, there are world quests, patrols, and adventures which take you back to the same areas like the Vex Caverns underneath Nessus or the Cabal carrier ship in the EDZ. Hilariously, even the raid has some backtracking as players must visit the central hub of the Leviathan 3 times in order to progress through the various sections. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Aside from some of the side mission designs which seem to be blatantly recycled throughout the experience, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain sees players replaying the prologue, but in episode 46. Things are a bit different this time around, which is a nice way of saying there's a shocking twist involved in the ending, but it's pretty much the same as the opening level. Knack 2. Knack 2 has received more critical praise than the original game, and while it may be better, it's still not opposed to making you replay levels. Chapter 13-2, Invasion Redux, is actually the same as Chapter 1-1. The context is that everything from Chapter 1-2 up till Chapter 13-2 is a flashback, with the very first chapter throwing you immediately into the present-day story. Regardless, it's a level that you're forced to replay. Hollow Knight. Metroidvania titles are always going to have backtracking because that's their very style of gameplay. Hollow Knight, arguably one of the best Metroidvania titles ever, does this pretty well as you revisit the City of Tears a few times or come upon a previous area that's now suffering from an infestation, which changes the enemies and pathways. There are also areas that you can revisit with newer abilities to help progress forward. Mass Effect Andromeda. Backtracking wouldn't usually be an issue in an open world game, but Mass Effect Andromeda takes this to a ridiculous degree. You'll be going back to the same planets to take on different tasks and story missions, seemingly hitting the same spots again and again. Our personal favorite is a side mission that could begin with a conversation in one area, which leads to another planet to continue that conversation. It gets a bit annoying after a while. Bloodborne. As is usually the case with a Souls game, you'll do a fair bit of running around and revisiting the same areas on your journey. It can be something as simple as revisiting Father Gascoigne's family and seeing them crumble further and further. Of course, that's not mentioning the number of times you'll have to run through levels again while failing at a boss again and again. Destiny. One of the most notorious aspects of Destiny, which would continue into its third year, was the reuse of areas for missions. Many story missions saw you revisit the same places that you conducted patrols in. The Will of Crota strike was infamous at launch for making you revisit areas from the Earth story missions. Let's not forget a Rise of Iron mission essentially being the Dust Palace strike, but backwards and shorter. That's not taking into account the Nightfalls, which are the same base strikes but rotated weekly and with some modifiers here and there. Super Metroid. As you'd expect from a Metroid game, you'll have to revisit previous areas with new abilities in order to progress forward or unlock additional items like energy tanks. Perhaps one of the cooler uses of revisiting a level is heading down to Zebes from the first Metroid, where Samus fought Mother Brain, except now the area is destroyed. Super Mario 64. Replaying or running through large sections of levels is kind of how 3D Mario games have always been, and Super Mario 64 is a good way to showcase this. En route to collecting certain stars, you may revisit areas you've already been to. Bob-omb Battlefield is an excellent example as you race Koopa the Quick to the top of the mountain for 1 star and travel up to fight Big Bob-omb for another star. You might also pass the big chain chomp several times in the process, who can also be freed for a star. Diablo 3. After finishing the story in Diablo 3, you'll unlock Adventure Mode, where you can revisit these areas to complete bounties and earn better gear. These bounties are randomly generated, and each time 5 are completed, you get a loot stash before 5 more are added. Greater Rifts can also kind of fit into this because, even if they're different tile sets, they bear plenty of resemblances to levels previously played. Nier Automata. To see the whole story that Nier Automata has to offer, you need to replay the game 3 times, with the final battle on the 3rd playthrough requiring another go-around. The repetition is obvious in 9S's campaign, where you see everything from his perspective, thus going on many of the same missions as 2B. Even when playing as A2, the ruined city, desert, amusement park, and abandoned factory have to be revisited, though there are plenty of twists and turns in the process. Undertale. Leave aside the fact that finding every single variation of the neutral run's ending requires replaying the game constantly. In order to get the full ending, you have to complete a neutral run and start a pacifist run, which means not killing anyone. If you want every single ending though, then there's a genocide run to embark on after this as well. Grand Theft Auto Online. If you want to earn big bucks in Grand Theft Auto Online, then there are a myriad of ways to do so, from gun running to becoming a CEO. However, another way is by grinding out jobs and heists, replaying the same missions again and again for more cash. Given the game's quasi-MMO nature, it kind of makes sense, and at least the variety of vehicles, routes, and weapons give you different ways to approach these missions and heists the 2nd or 30th time around. Shadow the Hedgehog. The epitome of headache-inducing replayability. Shadow the Hedgehog has 10 endings to unlock, along with a true ending. In order to unlock those 10 endings, you'll have to replay a number of the game's levels again and again, making slight changes in your route as you go along. It also doesn't help that the gameplay is just downright awful. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.